Hi. Well, here we are with The Tempest. The Tempest belongs to a unusual group of plays. They didn't fit very neatly as comedies. They didn't quite fit exactly with that. They're certainly not histories and they're not tragedies. Eventually, the literary critics called them romances. They include Pericles, Cymbeline, Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. I did toy with the idea of assigning the Winter's Tale this semester, but I like the Tempest better. I like the atmosphere better. So here's the thing about the romances. As I said, they're not cleanly into any other category. There is humor, there is comedy, sure, and the plays often end with a wedding or at least a promise of a wedding, like the comedy does. But that's not what it's really about, and it's certainly not funny all the way through. There's a lot more serious stuff. There's a real melancholy feel, sadness, wistful, many times kind of a sense of loss that comes with it. It's not satire, but it is a little grim. Sometimes it's realistic. Other times it's sentimental. Essentially, basically, the main thing about the romances is the idea of the atmosphere. As I said, this is one of the things I really like about The Tempest. In The Tempest, we have an island, a deserted island. Notice how deserted islands are really never deserted? Go figure. That kind of promise of a new start. Is it Eden? Is it a utopia? Can we build a brand new civilization? Are we bringing with us our human fallibilities and our sins and our jealousies and our hatred and our anger and just create it all over again in a new place? It's interesting to me, this whole idea in The Tempest. It taps into a recurring theme in Shakespeare of brother versus brother. We saw that in As You Like It, comedy, with a convenient ending with the brother conflict. We'll see it again much more seriously in Hamlet and in Lear. This is a theme, the conflict of brothers. It has a lot to do with the concept of primogeniture, in which one brother gets everything and the other brother gets nothing and has to make their own way in the world. And so that leads to a certain understandable jealousy, anger, resentment. We saw it, as I said, in As You Like It. The usurpation of the throne. This happens, of course, also in this play, The Tempest. It happens in Hamlet, obviously a key issue in Hamlet. Usurpation / murder. And then, of course, also in King Lear, not for the throne, but for Gloucester. Right? The Duke of Gloucester and his two sons, one legitimate, one illegitimate. But The Tempest isn't about that. It's not about the tragic and it's not about the comedic, but it is difficult. And in fact, brother usurps brother, and another pair of brothers are also in conflict. Naples and Milan. The Tempest is unusual also in that it presents one of the newest characters, Caliban. I should say newest characters. They're all new characters, but he's a new type of character. Of course, in the historical world around Shakespeare in the early 1600s, you get the beginning of England establishing colonies in what was then called the New World. Jamestown, right? And I hope you read in the preface the historical story of a shipwreck in an attempted mutiny. These stories were fascinating to the Europeans, and to Shakespeare presumably as well, since it made its way into The Tempest. Keep in mind that this is just the beginning, at least for the English, of the explorations of the New World. Everything's new, everything's different. And so Caliban, as a native of the deserted island, like there was nobody there, is a figure savage, angry, resentful. Contemporary times have been more sympathetic to Caliban. They see his resistance to colonial rule, if you will, as exemplified by Prospero. But he's an interesting character, depending on how he is portrayed. He could be, again, a half-human, half-beast type character. Or he could be the character who is fighting for his own land, his own destiny. He talks about language. He lost his own language. Takes on the English language. How very interesting and prescient. One of the other themes that is a little bit difficult is the issue of magic in this play. I'm sure many of you have heard of Christopher Marlowe, and those of you who took my English 215 class, I know who you were, know that Marlowe wrote a play called Dr. Faustus. And the Faustus story is, of course, where a man, the great scholar Faustus, has hit the end of all human knowledge. He knows everything there is to know in human knowledge. And so he agrees to sell his soul to Lucifer in exchange for all kinds of power, right? Magical power, for a period of 20 years, which seems like not much of a bargain for your eternal soul, but there you go. In Marlowe's play, magic is clearly aligned with Satan / Lucifer / the devil. Even in our own time, I can recall when Harry Potter was first coming out, there were some parts of the reading population, or whatever you want to call them, who were very upset by the issue of magic because it didn't jive with the Christian ideal that magic was a part of Satan, miracle is part of God, right? Now, Shakespeare is writing in the English Renaissance, granted, but it's still a much more heavily religious time. There would be a lot more people with a lot stronger, almost just immediate associations with magic and Satan. I mean, think in our own history of witch trials, right? Salem witch trials obviously predates the United States of America as a government, but it was here in the English colonies, right? They burned witches or drowned them. They did that all throughout Europe too. We don't talk about that much because as Americans, we never learn anybody's history except for our own, and even that not very well. But magic is what Prospero uses to control. He creates the storm at the beginning of the play. He puts people to sleep, like I do, although it's not quite so magical when I do it. The idea of magic has to be dealt with delicately in this play, so that Prospero is not seen as a satanic figure. And so it's interesting to me, and I kind of connect some of this, right, to the lure of nature. When you're out there, as he is, now granted he had books, right? Gonzalo packed his books, which was nice for a man you're throwing out of the kingdom. With those books, he had the knowledge to control nature. which puts him in a godlike position. Although his power is very, very limited because he's only there on the island. But he does pull in, finally, his brother on the ship. So I want you to think about these issues with the Tempest. It's a wonderful play to see produced, hopefully anyway. As I said, the atmospherics, the idea of the deserted island, the magic, to me, it's kind of fascinating and fabulous. It is kind of wonderful. This was definitely one of the plays that I wanted to teach. I mean, I considered A Winter's Tale, but honestly, just like that long. And then I went, well, if I have to pick, it's going to be The Tempest. I wanted to do both, but there was just no way to squeeze that into our semester. And you're probably not upset about that. I get it. That's fine. So The Tempest, the storm. Written near the end of Shakespeare's career. Greenblatt talks about that better than I can. About all the culmination of so much of what Shakespeare did. Hope you enjoyed.